Welcome to the special show. I'm Tamanna Inamdar. We're talking about the GST Council meet. Now, will the 53rd GST Council meet this Saturday make big changes or maintain the status quo? All eyes are on this key meet of state finance ministers for a couple of reasons. One, it is the first meet in over 8 months. And secondly, it's the first meeting after the recently concluded Lok Sabha elections where the ruling BJP now has TDP that won the state of Andhra Pradesh as a coalition partner. The BJP has also won in the Odisha state elections. So does that mean Finance Minister Nirmala Sitharaman, who heads this Council of State Finance Ministers, will have more support to push through important changes and decisions in the GST meet? What could some of those decisions be? For one, the rationalization of rates becomes very important. Secondly, what happens to compensation cess post-2026? But there's a lot more that is in focus as well. What we're going to try and do today on this show is get a realistic picture, separate fact from fiction, because you're probably seeing a lot of reports that there could be something done in online gaming, in fertilizers, in aerated beverage cans. In fact, there's a whole host of stories. But what is actually likely? That's what we're discussing. So to do this, I'm talking with Prashant Agarwal. He's partner at PwC India. Abhishek Rastogi joins us, founder of Rastogi Chambers, and L. Badri Narayanan, executive partner at Lakshmi Kumaran and Sridharan. Welcome to all of you, and thank you so much for joining us on NDTV Profit. Badri, I'm going to start with you. And, just since we're trying to set context over here, I want to start with what's realistic. We have seen fertilizer stocks go up, gas stocks go up, or some online gaming stocks respond in the markets on the expectations that these big changes which are pending will all be taken up in the first council meet. So first question to you, is that even likely, or is this going to be more of a meet and greet, let's get things started kind of a session?
So my own sense is that this is the first GST Council meeting after this historic election, where the BJP has come to power for the third time, but of course, with a coalition partner in TDP and others. So I think the important thing would be to set the stage for the next 3 years, 5 years for reforms. My expectation to start with would be that, before the elections itself, there were certain agenda items to be taken up. There was a lot of talk about rationalization of rates, but I still believe that the Fitment Committee for Rate is yet to provide all the information back to the GST Council. I think the budget is going to be coming up next month. I think the focus initially, at least in this GST Council meeting, would be to make certain key amendments that need to be made in the GST Act for the purpose of being able to operationalize certain things. For example, if they want to provide certain waivers for retrospective issues that are there for the past period, for example, online gaming, those will require certain powers to be provided to the executive to issue these waiver notifications. So I think one of the big agenda items there is an expectation is the GST Council to consider and put in place. And this is something which is affecting not only, say, the online gaming, but other industries also, where there's a difference of view between how the industry was undertaking certain practices and with respect to how, for example, the department is looking at the taxation. I think there are some other more key issues, for example, things like anti-profiteering adjudication, where the law committee has already made certain recommendations. Those are probably going to have an impact. But my expectation is that probably we should not expect too much from this first GST Council meeting. It's probably going to set the stage for some more reforms to come going forward. There will be some discussion on rates, maybe some discussions on amendments, and some streamlining of processes for the purpose of taking it forward. So those are my expectations at this stage.
Yeah, no, absolutely, and that was excellent, to set the stage for what's happening, because the number of expectations have just gone through the roof. So I'm going to come to some of them specifically. Abhishek Rastogi, do you think it is feasible? Let me come to the big one, gas. And this is also because the minister, after taking office, said that we're going to attempt in this term to bring taxation on gas under the ambit of the GST. Now, that's seen as low-hanging fruit as opposed to, say, trying to bring petrol and diesel under the ambit of GST. Do you think it's feasible? Do you think if at all there is a conversation, it starts in this meeting?
I think certainly this agenda item is on the cards. And I think this is a good beginning to start with, because, if you get one of these products under the GST gamut, it helps the industry and it also helps in a way to curb inflation in some way or the other. So I think the moot point today is that, we are looking in the right direction. And when we are talking about the controversial issues to be addressed, I think we also know for a fact, with the new government coming into play now, uh, the support is expected from some allies and partners as well, as far as these issues are concerned. But at the same time, there could be certain state specific issues which will have to be seen, that how the government approaches that, how the GST Council and the Finance Minister approaches that, because some of these issues may be very, very positive for key states, but may not be very relevant for other some states. So I think the pragmatic solution will have to work here. The more balanced approach will come here. I think this announcement with respect to gas is a welcome move, because we also feel that, most of these products must come under the GST regime. How it will happen, in
Abhishek,
what way it will
one
happen.
minute. Abhishek, there is no announcement yet on gas, which is a welcome move. We are asking whether they'll even talk about it. Do you really think they'll take it up in this meeting? Because
No, no. So
would
as far
all
as gas
states
is
want to give up, their revenues, whichever they're getting from gas right now, and bring it under the wider GST ambit?
See, what will happen is that these gas and petroleum products, there is a revenue which goes even to the state.
Right.
Now, well, while there may not be a formal announcement, there is always a discussion which is happening in this regard, because what we understand from the North Block, that there are certain papers on how the revenue would flow from this. That working has already happened. So while there may not be a formal announcement, there are workings with respect to the number crunching which has happened. When the GST Council meets, I think that number game will have to be discussed in some way, because some states will have some impact because of this inclusion. So what will happen is that these states which will have wider implications in terms of the revenue may oppose this move, but then there has to be some sort of a formula to compensate in some way or the other. So that's what is expected.
Okay.
So this is for the gas, but there could
Right.
be discussion with respect to other issues such as online gaming as well, which
Right.
would be relevant.
Okay. So online
From
gaming is
state perspective.
online gaming is a hot potato issue. Will they take it up in this meeting or not? Will have to be seen as well. Prashant Agarwal, let me come to you on the question of online gaming as well as fertilizers. Now, fertilizers is important, and it's a bit tricky over here, because fertilizers is one segment, like many others, which face this inverted duty structure. Simply put, that the GST rate on the inputs that go into making this product are higher than the GST on the final product. Do you see, and what kind of a rationalization do you see, if any?
So I think these are, as you rightly said, sensitive points, especially when it comes to fertilizers per se. And textile has gone through this earlier as well in terms of how the inverted duty structure can be played out. My sense is there will be discussion on this as far as the council is concerned. There is always a support to take care of the inverted duty structure in most of the sectors. But what has happened is, wherever there are sensitivities involved, especially with the end customers being involved, we have seen it has taken more time. So my personal assessment is discussions on fertilizers would happen. I'm assuming, or I'm sure that the council will look at the numbers as to how they play out. And then perhaps, if not in this council meeting, in the next meeting, there could be some decisions around inverted duty structure, because our assessment is there is always a big push to take care of inverted duty structure as part of the GST regime per se. So that's my sense on fertilizers at this point of time.
Okay, what in your view are going to be the big ticket items on the agenda, Prashant?
Yeah, so I think one of the big things that may happen, and it's being discussed a lot, is of course on the online gaming, which may come up. And our sense is that at least for the past period, there could be some kind of a assessment being done as to how relief may be provided to the industry, because at one point of time, the government is so supportive of building up this whole industry per se, and we have seen in the past that the past minister also had supported to relook at this. In fact, even when this decision was made, it was clearly stated that it would be reviewed at some point of time during this financial year. So one of the assessment is that the online gaming part of it would be something that they would look at. The other, which even Badri covered, that they could be, and which industry is also looking at, some kind of an amnesty being brought in. And for that, the amendment in law would be required. One would eagerly look at how they look at including some of the products. You said natural gas. There is also discussion on ATF, where the revenue impact is limited as far as the states are concerned. So, and that would set the podium for other products to get included over a period of time. I mean, it's not that it would happen immediately. Our assessment is that perhaps the discussion will surely happen, because natural gas was something that was picked up earlier as well. Our assessment is natural gas, ATF, the discussion would happen. One will have to see how and which states, if at all, oppose or bring up points of discussion. I don't see that the final decisions on natural gas or ATF happening immediately, but a lot of push may be made to discuss and come to some kind of a conclusion around it. That's on the broader picture. The other thing I see is that continuous efforts to see how duty evasions or the GST evasion can be taken care of. What more measures may be taken by the government around that is something that one should expect an announcement around. And those could mean that some of the compliance related changes which may be made, making it more robust as a process from a return filing process. Some of the things that the industry had asked from a compliance ease may also come into picture as we move along. So those are things broadly that I see happening. Of course, there could be tinkering of some of the rates and clarification, some of the burning topics which we have seen. It could be corporate guarantee, which was one big issue where the government did come up with some of the amendments, but still there were follow-up discussions which have happened with the industry. There could be areas we hope which may be picked up around ESOPs and discussed by the council, and hopefully clarification being brought in, which could bring in relief to the industry. So those are things that we believe broadly may be covered.
We're talking about the GST meet on Saturday. All eyes on what can come out of it. Expectations perhaps a little over the top, that there will be huge amounts of decisions being taken in a council which is reconvening after over 8 months and after a huge election. But nevertheless, there are some important issues to talk about. Just to quickly recap, if you've just joined the show, our guests, our experts who've joined us today, Prashant Agarwal, Abhishek Rastogi and L. Badri Narayanan, do believe that there could be some move on online gaming. That contentious issue could see some clarifications coming in. No real clarity if they will touch things like ATF, bringing gas under the ambit of GST, or even fertilizers and GST on fertilizers, but they could be on point of discussion. One other thing which needs to be on point of discussion, and I want to introduce this element into the conversation by first pulling up what kind of GST collections we've had. So in the month of May, we've had about 1.73 lakh crore rupees in GST collections. This is an increase of 10% year on year. If I account for refunds, because remember these collections, some of it will also be refunded, you still have about 6.5% increase year on year. I'm not talking about 23, 24, I'm talking about only the month of May. But the average monthly collection has been about 1.68 lakh crore rupees in the last financial year. In fact, in April, we hit a record of going above 2 lakh crore rupees in monthly collections. Now, why is that important? The reason also is does this now give an opportunity to start rationalizing rates? Let me come to Prashant Agarwal on this first. So, the idea of GST was that it's a good and simple tax, yet we do have 4 rates, 2 special rates for silver, jewelry, etc., precious gems. Then you have compensation cess, and all of this together creates quite a complex structure. Do you think now is the time to start talking about rationalization of rates?
So, I mean, I strongly believe that it's always a time to talk about rate rationalization. We all know when GST came about, there was compromise made to get consensus in place. And it's always good to see lower number of rates or types of rates that we're talking about. So definitely it's something that is should be on the radar and always being discussed how it can happen. We hopefully will see some, I mean, we would want to see some kind of a roadmap, because honestly speaking, one GST council, as you rightly said, there is already too much being talked about, and government has already formed a GOM to talk about the rate rationalization. One will have to see how the GOM, if at all, has met and come up with any kind of proposition around rate rationalization or not. Because there is debate around how to make five, how to, let's say, I mean, there have been multiple discussions which we have at least heard in public domain, whether 5 and 12 will get merged, one rate will come about as 8, whether 8 will move down, 18 will move down to 15, which was supposed to be the neutral rate, revenue neutral rate specifically. How would you take care of some of the exempted products? Would that be also brought in? So there are a lot of levers which have to be moved to make this happen. But surely, one would believe that if you are looking at a task of ease of doing business, making it more simpler as a GST, as a law, one has to move to this. And I guess there is no debate about it. It's about what will fit well and have a consensus in this democratic GST council is what we'll have to look at. So, these levers, how would they play out is what one has to look at.
Abhishek, your take on rationalization of rates and if such hot potato issues will also make it to the fore, especially right now. And the reason why I gave that context of GST collections is now GST collections are robust enough to start talking about this issue.
I think the formula is simple: broaden the tax base and lower the tax rate. So I think as far as the base is concerned, GST has been extended to a lot of these goods and services. Now is the time actually where lower the tax rate element of it has to come into play. And for that to come into play, we must understand that the rate of 18% is actually a high rate, especially on the services, because these are certain elements which are being directly consumed, for instance insurance, telecommunication services and things like that, so which makes the cost of procurement of these services very expensive. And hence I think the pragmatic approach to start with would be to rationalize the rate of 12 and 18%. How and or on what number they would do that, that is still to be seen. But that will at the same time reduce a lot of litigation which is happening between the two rates of 12% and 18%. Now, having said that, while we've been talking about rate rationalization, the other thing which impacts the consumers or which makes the cost of the supply expensive is the block credits. There are a lot of issues with respect to credits where vendor is not paying, a lot of credits which are being blocked for real estate sector, and these matters are before the court. Now, directly or indirectly, these also form part of the cost to the consumer, because the moment there are block credits, the cost of procurements increase, and adding the assuming the common margin of profit, the cost ultimately to the consumer in terms of price also increases. So I think the twin objective would be not only to rationalize the rate of 18% and come to a middle path of 18 and 12 for these classes of goods and services, but at the same time address lot of issues, because there are hundreds of petitions which are before several courts with respect to the credits issue, either with respect to the block credits, vendors not paying, credits denied, and things like that. So I think the twin approach will have to be addressed to pragmatically address this issue.
Okay. How do you see this, Badri? Is this something which is going to be sort of in the deep freeze for a while?
Yeah, I'm a pragmatic lawyer. So the way I see it is that you look at these rates and slabs, from the lens of what has actually been achieved. So my own sense is you kind of divide these things into tactical and strategic kind of aspects. Tactical is what we spoke about in the first half, rationalizing particular products, inverted duty structures, blocked credits, and things like that. I think those are very doable and very easy. What you're now talking about with respect to rationalization of slabs would require basically, again, for the GST Council to have a really deep discussion between the states with respect to whether something is to be increased, something is to be reduced. You must understand that the states are also equal party, and getting everybody to come on the same page and to come up with this kind of rate structure was very, very important. What I do feel over time, what will happen is that more and more products will probably start moving into two of these slabs. And I would prefer something like a 12% and 18% as opposed to, having slabs where there is 5% and 28%. Because if you get it wrong, then the rate of tax itself is so much higher than probably your profit margin and your revenue margins that the company itself goes into insolvency, in which case a lot of notification will have to be issued for purpose of waiving these rates of tax, because the industry itself will not be able to survive. So I think the more important thing would be to kind of tactically handle some of these things, is what I think the GST Council, at least the next year or so, probably should do. Make sure the fitments are correct wherever there are all of these issues that both Abhishek and Prashant have kind of spoken about: block credits, inward duty structures, all of those to be sorted out. And then probably at some point of time where there's really a reform in mind and we feel that the slab should be rationalized, kind of do it as a two-step process. First, bring these products as much as possible closer to each other, and then probably attack a 3 rate or a 2 rate. You must understand, a country like India with so much of complexity, to be able to have a two slab rate or a 3 slab rate is probably very ambitious. But I would, of course, as a lawyer and as someone who probably wants to increase the ease of doing business in India, prefer something like that.
No, Badri, I get the fact that you're pragmatic, but then, okay, let me just pick up this Malabar Parota case. It's been going back and forth since the last several years. Is it parota? Is it bread? Is it 5%? Is it 18%? Yeah, it's a great example. And absolutely, GST has increased ease of doing business. One nation, one tax is a great idea. It's increased transparency, etc. But this just needs to be fixed. Do you think that this will be a priority, or how can it be a priority?
I think what I call this case, I call as an edge case. An edge case being that in any regime, you'll always have some number of products that are going to have a problem. Okay, and this is a very interesting thing as to what is the nature of what we generally consume in a matter, and something which, if it was just a single rate or a 2 slab rate kind of a system, would have been able to address, and it would have been no problem at all. I still feel that we should not, for example, redo our entire GST regime because of these edge cases. And these edge cases, I think there should be flexibility in the government and in the board to be able to address it, either by way of circulars or by way of notifications or by way of clarifications, so we're able to take care of it. But based on this, if you want to change the entire regime, which was basically an agreement between the states and the center with respect to how the rate should be, to ensure that we were able to transition from excise and service tax and sales tax and VAT into this GST regime, that's probably a much, much bigger question. That's where I come from. I'm probably, being a lawyer, we kind of come from that perspective as to how things should be handled. Of course, as lawyers, we love to do more and more cases of Malabar Parata. But having said that, I think edge cases, should never use that for the purpose of being able to make...
No, but I get that, but there might be a lot of other examples as well. I don't know if Abhishek also wants to come into this, if Prashant is smiling as well. Just quick final comments on the complications which still need to be sorted. Abhishek, I'll come to you first.
I think the real problem is that when you are going even to the advanced ruling authorities, they are not passing clear orders. They are basically all tilted towards revenue. And that's the bigger problem which industry is facing, even for certain taxation issues on these IPS services, when there was a dispute between the 12% and the 18%. And hence, the problem which the industry today is facing is that when you talk about advanced ruling, all of these rulings, I think, and Badri and Prashant will add to it, 95% plus matters are tilted towards revenue. So what is the point of going to the advanced ruling authorities? And I'm using that as a conservative number. Even a higher number could be tilted as, against the assessees and towards the revenue. So I think advanced ruling per se, we have seen, are not passing those orders which, should have been passed. Now, the only recourse which remains is to challenge those orders in courts with respect to the rates. And what happens is, because this being an indirect tax, in most of the situations, you would not be able to recover those additional taxes, and it's a burden on the company.
So compliance, litigation, also a big deal. Just last comment from you, Prashant, before we wrap, and I'm completely out of time, but yet there is a case for simplifying this further.
Absolutely. I mean, none of us would deny that there is a case for simplifying. And you have to start the discussion at some point of time. So I am a firm believer that these things will take time. Unless we start the discussion, it will only get prolonged as we move along. So my sense is rate rationalization discussions should continue, should show seriousness in terms of what is the roadmap that they're looking at. It won't happen in, let's say, next 6 months, even, to my understanding. What is also important is look at litigations. The roadmap was created for GSTAT. I believe there would be some discussion around pre-deposits that would hopefully ease off if there is something around that. So that is again an important piece. One should look at how fast track we can do in terms of litigations. What could be some of the boundaries created to avoid unnecessary litigations as well to move forward from a government standpoint. So those are additional aspects that one should look at as we move along in this journey of
All
GST.
right. So a lot of the laundry list of wishes from the GST Council is frankly unending. How many of those they actually address is what we'll wait and see. So thank you to all of you for joining us today. But before I wrap up, must remind our viewers that we are going to be on top of the entire story, the GST Council meet and its implications all of Saturday. So do stay tuned to NDTV Profit.